Studies are showing that this generation of students has a greater openness to the things of God and to pursuing Jesus than previous generations. And we're witnessing that, we're experiencing that, and I just want to say thank you for helping us continually invest in the next generation. And to watch those baptisms, and I was there, it was just so moving, and as Shane mentioned, we have some later today. I know that there's a lot of rumors out there that the Church of Jesus Christ is dying and it's slowly dissolving. Let me tell you, it is alive and well. This month, we will baptize more people at Redmond, right here at our Redmond campus, than ever in our entire history in a single month. And I share that to let you know God is on the move and great things are happening. That being said, I'm a little tired. I just got back from the most intense hike I've ever done in my life. Camped out in the middle of the mountains right near Mount Baker, where no man has ever gone before, and just sleeping in tents and camping. I don't even like to call it a hike. I told the guy I was with, this is an obstacle course, because that is literally what it felt like, but fun to be back. So here's the deal. There's a tiny village in South Wales by the name of Aberfan. And in the late 1800s, a mine was opened up and coal started being extracted. So for more than 50 years, the debris and the waste from this mine was lifted up in huge bins, carried outside the town, and dumped onto a hillside right outside of it. Over time, that debris piled up, and it started to look like a mountain with a couple of peaks. They were over 100 feet tall, blended in with the landscape. And then in the fall of 1966, this village experienced a heavy amount of rainfall, an unusual amount of heavy rainfall, and the rain ended up saturating the mountains of waste and the mountains of debris, making it unstable and waterlogged, almost like a sponge ready to collapse. And sure enough, as the townspeople are going about their day, they're at work, they're running errands, the tip of this massive debris pile starts to slip. And 2 million tons of coal and rock and mud start flowing down at a terrifying speed down the mountain and into the valley. And within a matter of seconds, the town of Aberfan was transformed into a living nightmare. The village school was destroyed. There was a cluster of homes that were destroyed. 144 individuals, mostly children, lost their lives. Just terrifying. And what's interesting when you think about it is for decades, the people living in Aberfan were working hard to build and establish their community, and this giant mountain of debris was in the background, and it really stood as a testament to their hard work. But in a moment, all of that changed, and it really, as we know, wasn't a moment. It was the result of years and years and years and decades of making a decision that wasn't the best, and it all came collapsing down in a moment. And what makes the tragedy even worse is that the villagers, the people living there, had seen the danger. They recognized it. Many of them had written letters and signed petitions to send off to authorities, but those letters and petitions were brushed aside because those in authority had blind spots. They didn't think it was that big of a deal, and the people of Aberfan ended up paying the price. Well, today what we're doing is we're continuing a teaching series on blind spots, on things we don't really see, on things we don't pay attention to in our own lives, right? Because that's what a blind spot is, something we don't see. It's something we're unaware of. And typically, we use this term blind spot in the context of driving, but certainly we have lots of blind spots in life. The problem is we don't know what we don't know. So if we have a blind spot, we're unaware of it, and yet it still impacts our life. So if you have a blind spot of an addiction that's quietly and slowly forming in your life, you may not realize it until the damage is done. A blind spot can be anything. A blind spot can be pride that keeps me from apologizing, that keeps me from acknowledging I'm wrong. And then what happens is over the years, it starts wreaking havoc in my relationships, but I don't realize it's because of deep-rooted pride. A blind spot can be burnout that causes indifference or causes me to be emotionally numb, and now I'm more vulnerable to different types of temptation. A few weeks ago, we talked about how a blind spot can be cynicism that is slowly robbing us of hope and of joy. But if we don't know that we have this blind spot there, what happens is we just assume this is the way the world is. So we don't know what they are, yet they continually impact our lives and the decisions we make. And today what I wanna do is I wanna talk about a blind spot that all of us share, and if we don't learn to recognize it and deal with it, it will inevitably overtake our lives. It will cause all sorts of destruction. And that blind spot that we're gonna focus in on today is called compromise. It's called compromise. I don't say this a lot, but I feel like today's talk doesn't have a lot of humor. I don't maybe have as many stories that I might normally have. Today's talk has the potential to be life-changing if you just implement one or two things. Compromise is very, very subtle, right? It's this subtle shift in values, subtle shift in priorities. It's like we're just dumping debris and coal on a side of a hill. It's no big deal, but I'm telling you, over time, it can catch up. So put it another way, like life is like we're on a path, right? We're just walking in a direction. And if the path we're on is filled with all sorts of compromise, inevitably the place it leads to is not somewhere where we want to be. And we should already know this, because every single day on the news or in social media, we come across stories of politicians, we come across stories of faith leaders, we come across stories of CEOs, we come across stories of incredibly gifted athletes, people who may have influence, people in some cases who have enormous amounts of resources, people who've achieved a lot, and then it just feels like in a moment they lose it all because of moral or ethical risks that they took. And whenever we see something like that happens, we just sit back and it drives us crazy because we're like, dear God, if I was married to her, there's no way I would have been unfaithful, right? If I had that much money, if I had that much talent, if I had that much influence, if I had built what they built, there's just no way I would have taken the risks that they took and compromised morally or ethically and ended up where they ended up. I just wouldn't have done it. Why did they do it? How were they so blinded? And the truth is, we know this, nobody ever intends to sabotage their life. Nobody does. But what ends up happening is we do sabotage our lives through a series of compromises. Little compromises that don't seem like a big deal, over time as they add up, become incredibly, incredibly destructive. When we talk about compromising, we're talking about trading what's right for what's easy. Compromising is when we start lowering our values to satisfy our desires. It's when we give up what we want most for what we want now. And the reason we're talking about compromise as a blind spot is because most of the time when we compromise, we don't even realize we're compromising. We're just making a quick decision. We're just kind of going through the natural flow of life and hoping for the best. 2,000 years ago, this was the reality being experienced by the people of Ephesus. They were pursuing pleasure and success and status at all costs, making all sorts of compromises that they didn't even think about. Now, of course, Ephesus is still in existence today. My wife and I were there just a couple of years ago. Fascinating town. Lots of historical places that we read about in the scriptures. Well, the Apostle Paul, 2,000 years ago, writes a letter to a network of house churches in Ephesus, and he writes very candidly about the stuff that he says you need to stay away from. And it's all stuff we'd expect, right? He says things like, don't be greedy, don't be sexually immoral, don't hurt other people, choose your words wisely. So he just is giving common sense, but then he writes this. He says, so be careful how you live. Be careful. Don't live like fools, but like those who are wise. Make the most of every opportunity in these evil days. People who sabotage their lives unintentionally are just people who aren't careful. They're not idiots. They're not evil. They're just careless. So Paul says, live like those who are wise. Well, how do wise people live? I heard a definition years ago from someone that I've just kind of held on to and continue to use it even to this day in various messages. But a wise person, when you think about it, is someone who lives today with tomorrow in mind. It's someone who understands all of life is connected. That each decision I make isn't an isolated decision. It's like a game of connect the dots, right? There's a ripple effect from the decisions I make today and what happens in my life tomorrow. So the question we all ought to consider and wrestle with on a regular basis is this: what do you want your tomorrow to look like? If you were to just look at the path of life and you were to think down 20 years, 30 years from now, right? Maybe that's a little dangerous to think that long for some of you. You'd be like, I think I'm gonna be in the grave. But like 10 years from now or 5 years from now, right? Who do you want to be? What do you want your life to look like? How do you want to be remembered? What do you want to be known for? Like when you think, as a parent, this is what I want to be known for. When my kids talk about me 10 years from now, here's what I want them to say about growing up in our house. Or here's the kind of husband, here's the kind of dad, here's the kind of mother that I want to be. We've got to think about this stuff. Go down that path of life in your mind. As an employee, how do you want to be known? Be specific. I want to be the employee that everybody wants on their team because of my work ethic and my character. That'd be great. What kind of neighbor do you want to be? Have you ever thought about like what kind of neighbor do you want to be? When your neighbors think about you, talk about you, do you want to be the one who brought joy to the neighborhood and really did a good job of bringing people together, built community? As a manager, who do you want to be? Maybe you want to be the hero. I want to be the person everybody goes to that I can dispense wisdom and they're just like, man, I am this machine for information. Or maybe you say, I want to be the hero maker. I don't care about being I want to be the hero maker. I want to find talent and I want to develop it. Who do you want to be? As a parent, who do you want to be? I've shared this before, but generally speaking, when I think about my life, this is a very general thing, and I adopted, this isn't new to me. I want to be loved and respected the most by the people who know me best. And the reason this is so important to me is because often the people who love and respect someone the most are the people who know them the least. And the people close to them are like, I don't love them or respect them. I want people to say, Dave was the same person everywhere he went. Yeah, he was a little crazy at times. Yeah, he said things he probably shouldn't have said. But I respect the fact that he didn't try to put up some sort of guard in front of himself to keep people from knowing who he really was. A wise person is someone who lives today with tomorrow in mind. So Paul continues his challenge. He writes, don't act thoughtlessly, but understand what the Lord wants you to do. Don't act thoughtlessly. That means don't rely on your emotions. Don't just trust your gut instinct. Don't be careless. He says, try to wrap your mind around what the Lord would want you to do in the big areas of your life. Who does God want you to be as a parent? Who does God want you to be when it comes to how you handle your resources? Who does God want you to be when you think about the kind of employer that you need to be? And once you determine who God wants you to be, and that takes time. It takes sitting through messages like this and studying the scriptures. Once you determine, you start making decisions that move you down that path. Now, it's not ever easy because once we decide who we want to be, there's going to be all sorts of pitfalls for us to fall into, which is why we need to establish guardrails. Guardrails keep us safe. Guardrails ensure we don't fall down the cliff to the left or to the right. Almost everybody knows that guardrails keep vehicles from going into dangerous or off-limit areas, right? So let's just do some quick examples, right? Bridges, right? There are always gonna be guardrails on bridges because it's better for us to hit a guardrail than it is for us to fly off the bridge. There's gonna be guardrails in medians to protect us from oncoming traffic and to protect oncoming traffic from us, right? There's gonna be medians around curves. There's always gonna be guardrails around, often there's gonna be guardrails around curves or there's gonna be guardrails around unexpected changes in the road. But ultimately, the purpose of guardrails is to protect us from danger. And the thing about guardrails is we don't really notice them. We don't pay attention to them. If I asked you, how many guardrails between your house and between your place of work or between your house and where your kids live, you're not gonna know, right? They're just kind of invisible. We don't think about them. They're there, though, to keep us safe. A few years ago, I watched a Dateline special about a mother and two of her children who were struck by an 18-wheeler while driving on a bridge in California. And this woman's car was left dangling 50 feet above the creek below. You'll see the car here just mangled. Somehow she survives, her kids survive. Just a crazy, crazy story. But a guardrail kept them safe. That's what it's supposed to do. So when it comes to guardrails, nobody argues their existence. Nobody argues the reason, the purpose for having them. None of us are gonna stand outside a Target and say, can you sign my petition? I wanna get rid of guardrails. Right? We understand their value when it comes to driving. We understand the value on bridges and medians. But we also need guardrails in our life. Once we determine the kind of person we wanna be, in order to keep us from going off the edge in one way or the other, we need to establish guardrails to say, this is gonna keep me safe. Relational guardrails, financial guardrails, moral guardrails, ethical guardrails, guardrails in regard to my entertainment, guardrail is in regard to the social media that I consume. We just need guardrails. And it's so hard because it feels so legalistic and it feels so, it just feels, I don't need rules. I don't like rules, right? But we need them. Because for most of us, the greatest regrets in our life go back to a time period in our life, to a season, to a decision we make where we just didn't have guardrails. We weren't paying attention. We were just kind of being careless. And we ended up in dangerous territory. And just to make sure we're on the same page, a guardrail is a self-imposed standard of behavior that directs and protects our lives. That's what it is. It directs and protects us. It keeps us from going too far down the path of compromise. It's self-imposed. It's not a rule. It's not a law. There's not a Bible verse I can give you for it. It's just a personal choice that we make as a matter of conscience that just says, that's where I want to end up. So these are the guardrails that I'm self-imposing on myself, so I end up there. Incredibly important to establish them. But it's not easy to do so because we live in a culture that does not talk about guardrails. They actually, in many ways, will mock guardrails. Right? Our culture embraces and talks much more about things like painted lines. Right? A painted line is a guide. It's a good rule. Follow this. It doesn't protect you from anything. It helps guide you, but if someone decides to go over it, you're in trouble. Right? So let me give you an example of a painted line. When it comes to alcohol, culture will say, you know what you need to do? Drink responsibly. What does that even mean? Right? What does that even mean? A guardrail is going to be much more clear. A guardrail is going to say, because alcoholism runs in my family, I've decided for me, I don't drink alcohol. Or maybe it's, I fear the damage alcohol can do, so for me, I don't drink any more than 2 drinks in any single setting. So I change settings every few hours. Right? Maybe your guardrail is, I'm never gonna drink alone. I'm gonna avoid going to parties where the goal is to get drunk. Whatever it is for you. And the thing is, I can have a guardrail that you don't have, and that's fine. You have to know your life. You have to know your temptations. You have to know your vulnerabilities, and you just say, I'm setting up the guardrails. Another guardrail that we see, or another painted line that we see a lot in our culture is when it comes to finances, it's always like, this is a good time to buy because, and just fill in the blank, right? 0% financing for 72 months. It's a great painted line. I can see it. I kind of know what I'm committing to. It's not a guardrail. Guardrail is going to be much more specific. A guardrail is going to say, I've decided I'm not going to take out a loan on anything that depreciates. Or I'm going to stay within my predetermined budget. Or I'm not going to buy anything over, fill in the blank, $5,000, $10,000 on impulse. I'm going to take time to think about it, right? It's just thinking through. It's being more specific. Another painted line in our culture is follow your heart. Again, what does that even mean? What does that mean? If we followed our hearts, every single one of us would be married to someone we met in the 4th grade. Right? Follow my heart. So what is it, right? You do you. Can I tell you, as followers of Jesus, when we surrendered our life to Jesus, we said, I'm no longer just following my heart. I'm not going to lean on my own understanding, but in all of my ways, I'm going to acknowledge you, knowing that you will direct my path. So part of following Jesus is saying, God, I'm not just going with my heart. And so it is incredibly wise to set up guardrails, but it's not easy. Because we're surrounded every day by good people, well-meaning individuals. I'm not mocking the individual. Our culture is just, you need to lighten up. Stop having so many rules. Have more fun. You're living such a sheltered life, right? How can you believe this stuff? I've seen this over and over and over, where our culture will push us, they'll encourage us, they will challenge us to get as close to the edge as possible. And then the moment we go over, they mock us and shame us and cancel us. Come on, it's just a strip club. Come on, everybody watches porn. Come on, it's no big deal. Let's throw all this stuff into our movies. What do you mean you were unfaithful to your husband? What do you mean you were unfaithful to your wife? How could you do that? How could you share? We bait you to the edge, and then we mock you when you go over. The thing about guardrails, nobody cheers them on, right? I shared a personal guardrail of mine last week that probably sounds like I'm being legalistic. I've decided that for my life, this is not something I'm pushing on anybody else. I do not ride alone with another woman in my car who's not my wife, right? Obviously, my family and my kids or whatever, but I won't do it. Well, Dave, do you not trust yourself? I totally trust me. Do you not trust the ladies? Trust them too. I've just lived long enough to know this. I'm at a stoplight, somebody drives by, sees me in a car with a woman I'm not married to. I cannot control the narrative that goes on in their head. I can't control the story that tells them. So I just said, it's a wise thing for me to just put up a guardrail. And then to share that guardrail, because it keeps me intentional on keeping it. But we all have different guardrails, right? As a pastor, I know who I want to be. At the end of the day, man, I want to be someone who, when people talk about Dave, I want them to say, man, he loved God. He was a great shepherd. He pastored this church with his heart. He loved people. He pointed us to Jesus. So I'm gonna just tell you a simple I do not expect other people to have this guardrail. I don't mock people who don't. I'm just telling you for me. I, as a guardrail, don't have a green room. It's not like I get done with the message, like, oh, get out of here. Get away from these crazies. And just go sit there and get, waited on hand and foot. No, I just don't do it. What do? I go out in the lobby. I don't have a team of security. I can handle my own. But why? We have to do these guardrails. Guys, who do you want to be? As a follower of Jesus, can I just tell you, I know I just want to be faithful. I don't want to deconstruct my faith. I don't want to lead this church in a bad direction. I just want to be faithful. At the end of the day, I want to say, man, Dave had a long obedience in the same direction. That's what I want. So that's why I surround myself with Christian community. Now, I have plenty of people who don't follow Jesus in my life. I have plenty of people I love and I'm friends with. But I'm telling you, my closest friends are people that have a similar belief system and are moving me and challenging me in the right direction. And I know it's easy to dismiss. It's easy to think, it's not that big of a deal. I'm telling you it is. And the reason why is because every good thing has a potential downside. I don't care what it is. You have a good thing in your life, a good goal, good me. Every good thing has a potential downside, and so we just need some guardrails. So little examples, just kind of ridiculous here. Fire, right? Fire is an amazing thing. When fire was first created, community was built around it. People could cook food, right? There's just so many good things. It keeps people warm. So many good things with fire. But fire that's not contained, what happens? It destroys things. It destroys forests and homes. It burns down things. And so a good thing can become deadly. Around 5,000 years ago, Sumerians living in Mesopotamia invented writing. It was a way to communicate on clay tablets. Revolutionary, right? You did not have to be in the room any longer to hear someone's thoughts. You could read their thoughts. But this world has quickly learned that the written word is a megaphone. So whether it's through books or through blogs or through social media, we can say whatever we want. That can be encouraging, it can be helpful, it can be uplifting, but we also know it can be incredibly destructive and damaging. It can start wars. It can destroy families. It can spread misinformation. As your pastor, I want you to understand, this is why I'm so passionate about this, because our life has so many good things in it. God has just given us so many good things. Success, pleasure, money, relationships, ambition, sex, freedom, work, technology, knowledge. Right? This life just filled with beauty and rest and food and drink and laughter and celebration. God has given us the ability to have a rich and satisfying life. But if we do not have guardrails in place, we can do so much damage and destruction to the joy and fulfillment that He intends for us to have. This is why the scriptures talk about Satan as someone looking to kill, steal, and destroy. So I want to be loved and respected the most by people who know me best. If I'm not careful, if I don't have guardrails, I can just start giving in to everything they want. I can start compromising because I want to be loved. I want to be accepted by them. If I'm not careful, I can start going down a bad route, even with the right goal. In one of his first century letters, the disciple Peter writes, "Stay alert. Watch out for your great enemy, the devil. He prowls around like a roaring lion, looking for someone to devour." Constantly looking to destroy our lives. And he's not going to do it in obvious ways. He's going to do it in very, very subtle ways. It's just going to be in small compromises and just this debris pile building up. It's just going to be in little things of going down the path, not paying close attention. And so we have to be aware that even when we do establish guardrails, we're still vulnerable. We just always have to be looking out. How is this going to damage my life if I'm not careful? So let me just tell you some of the areas that we compromise the most, and we'll go through these fairly quickly, right? We tend to compromise the most, number one, when we're impatient. When we grow impatient, we just make dumb decisions, right? The Israelites were slaves in Egypt for 400 years. God miraculously delivers them from slavery. They now have freedom. 2 months into their journey with freedom, they find themselves camping out at the bottom of Mount Sinai. Their leader, Moses, goes up on a hike in the mountain. He wants to connect with God, sync his heart with God, kind of get direction for moving forward. He's up there. They think he's gonna be up there a few days. Well, those days turn into weeks. Then a month goes by. They're wondering, is Moses ever coming back? And they start to panic. Here's what we read. When the people saw how long it was taking Moses to come back down the mountain, they gathered around Aaron. Come on, they said, make us some gods who can lead us. We don't know what happened to this fellow Moses who brought us here from the land of Egypt. So what do? They say, well, we thought God delivered us from Egypt, but it must be someone else. So they start making idols and worshiping idols. And sure enough, 40 days after in the mountain, Moses comes down and says, what is going on? Because our greatest regrets often happen when we're impatient. I'm impatient on waiting for someone, so I jump into a toxic relationship. I ignore all the red flags. I'm impatient, and so I impulsively change careers. I make irrational financial decisions. I quit a marriage too soon. I walk away from a church I love because there's one or two people who offended me. When we're impatient, we tend to lose focus of the kind of person we want to be, and that's when we become very irresponsible, and even if we did have some guardrails, we stop paying attention to them. Another time we tend to be very vulnerable and when it comes to guardrails is when we're burned out. When we're burned out, it's like we're living in a fog. We're getting different, we're not thinking rationally. And this is why the Apostle Paul challenges first century readers living in Galatia. He says this, he says, let's not get tired of doing what's good. Why does he say that? Because it's very tiring trying to do what's good all the time. Let's not get tired. Why? At just the right time, we will reap a harvest of blessing if we don't give up. In long seasons of stress and in difficulty, it's very, very tempting to make decisions that ultimately implode our lives. Now, I'm gonna tell you something. This did not implode my life. I'm not pretending it did. I have a financial guardrail that I've paid attention to since I was like 18 years old. I do not buy a car without cash. I just pay in cash. I just don't like debt on a depreciating value. That's me. I don't expect you to do it. That's me. 2017 was the most difficult year of my life. I was burned out. I was tired. I was exhausted. I went and bought a brand new car and financed it. Now, my life didn't implode. But if I started to live like that, it could put me in a very dangerous place financially if I just got in that pattern and that habit. And thankfully, I'm just glad I recognize it. And I'm like, dear God, what is going on that I'm not thinking clearly? But when we're burned out, we don't think clearly. Another time that we tend to ignore the guardrails and not pay attention, or we take them down for a season, is when we're under pressure. Right? This is what happened with Pilate, the Roman governor of Judea. He didn't want for Jesus to die. He was very uncomfortable with ordering his execution because Pilate was convinced that Jesus was innocent. He actually thought there is something special about this man, but there were Jewish priests, there were leaders stirring up the crowds in opposition of Jesus. Here's what we read. Pilate saw that he wasn't getting anywhere and that a riot was developing. So he sent for a bowl of water, washed his hands before the crowd, saying, I am innocent of this man's blood. The responsibility is yours. He ordered Jesus flogged with a lead-tipped whip, then turned him over to the Roman soldiers to be crucified. So pressure just causes us to be very short-sighted. When a student is under pressure to get a good grade, that's when they're most vulnerable to cheat. Right? When a politician is under pressure to be elected, that's when they're most vulnerable to make promises they don't intend to keep. When an employee is under pressure and feels like I might be losing my job, that's when they're most vulnerable to lie or to blame or to cut corners. So we have to be paying attention all the time. This is not easy. This is hard work. And then the fourth area that tends to be a time when we take down the guardrails or we completely ignore them is when we're being influenced by others. I'd argue that the vast majority of times that we've compromised our morals, our values, our ethics, our worldview is when we have been under intense influence by culture or by family or by friends or voices that distract us. This is the story of King Solomon. 3,000 years ago, Solomon, deeply devoted to God, but he had a weakness for women. Imagine that. Here's what we read. Now King Solomon loved many foreign women. Besides Pharaoh's daughter, he married women from Moab, Ammon, Edom, Sidon, and from among the Hittites. The Lord had clearly instructed the people of Israel, you must not marry them. Oh, why? Is he against interracial marriage? Is he against marrying people of other? No, that had nothing to do with it. You must not marry them because they will turn your hearts to their gods. They have a completely different belief system. I just want you to remain faithful to me. And yet, Solomon insisted on loving them anyway. And in fact, they did not turn his heart away, or they did turn his heart away from the Lord. The greatest influences in our life tend to be the people closest to us. Over time, our values shift, our habits change, our faith begins to evolve into a place we never saw it coming. Friends have power. I told you, I just got done with the most intense hike of my life. It was with a guy in this church, 67 years old. Let's do a hike. Oh yeah, I'll go on a couple-day hike with you. We'll camp out in the mountains, that's great. There were probably 6 or 7 times in this hike where I looked at him and I said, bro, I'm terrified right now. Like there's a huge drop. I'm holding on to brush like on this path. There's just, this is not smart. And I said, I think we should turn around. He goes, it's not much farther, let's go. He said that 6 or 7 times, not much farther, right? I just kept following him. So we do. That's why at the end of King Solomon's life, he writes these words, walk with the wise and become wise, associate with fools and get in trouble. A fool is the opposite of a wise person. They live today with today in mind. They don't think about the ripple effects of their decisions. I'm telling you, once you determine who you want to be, if there are not guardrails set up, it's just gonna be easy to go off the side. We have to set up guardrails, even with friends. Friends who aren't careful with their life will not be careful with yours. Friends who don't really care much about their own marriage are not gonna be concerned about your marriage. Friends who aren't careful with their finances won't encourage you to be careful with yours. So even with friends, we need guardrails. I'll tell you, one of the simple guardrails, I don't have a bunch, one of the simple guardrails that I have with my friends has nothing to do with their faith, has nothing to do with their personality, has everything to do with their positivity. I will not hang with people for any length of time that are just negative. There's enough negative things happen this way. If someone's negative, I just stop hanging around them. And I'm telling you, establishing guardrails can be exhausting. We have to continually swim against the flow of culture. Nobody is standing around cheering us on. But those guardrails will protect us. And I'm telling you, if you just one area, just find one area right now, you're like, I probably should put up a guardrail. I'm telling you, one guardrail, 2 guardrails in your life right now could be a massive difference in how you're perceived at the end of your life and what you're known for. In a few moments, we're going to celebrate people whose lives are being impacted by God in water baptism. And so they're gonna start getting ready, but baptism is such a powerful thing because it says, hey, I'm not just going after what I desire, I really am trying to pursue God in my life. And so that's what we're celebrating today. And as they get ready, I just wanna show you a picture, Golden Gate Bridge. 1.7 miles long, painted with a color known as vermilion orange. And what nobody thinks about, of course, as we drive across it, if you've ever been there, is that that is constantly being worked on. It's constantly being painted. It's not something they paint every 5 years, 10 years. It's always going on. There's a team of 30 to 35 people who we never see, we never notice. They're just painting and maintaining the bridge. It's because obviously there's a high salt content in the air. There's water around the bridge. It can cause it to rust and corrode. And if corrosion is happening over time, there's gonna be some significant damage. We can't leave this thing unsealed. And so there's constantly people working on it. Nobody's applauding them, nobody's cheering them on, nobody even notices it. It's just monotonous. And I'm telling you, that's often how it feels when we are working on our lives and we're setting up our guardrails and we're just trying to move forward in the direction of the person we want to be. I'm telling you, you do it. You will not have the regrets that you could have if you had chosen to ignore the idea of establishing guardrails in your life. Just a moment, I'm gonna pray. Then we're gonna celebrate baptism. And what baptism is it's our way of identifying with Jesus. We're saying just like Jesus died and was buried, my old life is dead and buried. When we come up out of the water, we're saying just like Jesus was resurrected, I've been resurrected to new life. And so when we see people come up out of water today, we're gonna cheer them on. They're not saying they're perfect. They're not saying they got everything together. As a matter of fact, they're saying, I don't have everything together. This is why I need Jesus. So we celebrate that. You can remain seated. The music team is going to lead us, but I'm gonna pray. Our Heavenly Father, we thank you for the many, many good things you give us in this life. We pray that you would give us wisdom to know what guardrails we need to personally establish in our life based on our wiring, based on our makeup, our personality, our vulnerability, our temptations, what guardrails we need to establish in our life in the various areas. Give us wisdom to know what we need to do, and then give us the courage to do it. In Jesus' name, amen.